That's awesome. So you cold called to get the product made. You cold called to get to Bed Bath and Beyond and Brookstone and Wayfair, et
Yeah.
cetera. I'm sensing a theme here. So it all goes back to your days as cold calling in the medical device equipment sales
I
and
really think so. I
that's
do. I
awesome.
do because I learned from that how to find the right person using the internet or,
Sure.
other, just looking people up and trying to find the right prospects, is fundamental of sales, right?
Sure.
So I would find out who the buyer was for Brookstone, Wayfair. I remember with Brookstone, I couldn't get through. I had a name, but they wouldn't let me talk to them. So I just kept sending an email pitch to all the different combinations of the first and last name and the email
Oh, I
at
love that.
brookstone.com.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I kept getting return. And then finally my email went through and they didn't respond right away. But within a few weeks, I had an email back from the assistant buyer. And then I flew to their headquarters to
Wow.
pitch the product. Yeah.
That's
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars. Welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking. That's hashtag Rockstars Rocking. And boy, am I with a rock star today. I'm with my new good friend, Natalie Monaco, founder, CEO, inventor extraordinaire of Covermade Easy Bed Making Comforters, patented, by the way, which we will talk about. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super fired up to have you. And I'm really excited about your product because I told you when we first met online that I thought I owned your product and I lied. I didn't know I was lying. Please don't be offended. But I had to run it by my wife after I spoke so stupidly. And she said, we don't own that, but we have to own it. We need it. So we are going to get it. I promise you. And I want to dig right in to your product. You're an inventor, and I want to talk about your background. I want to talk about a lot, and we have a short period of time. So unless
Sure.
you have an objection, I want to dive right in.
Go for it.
Awesome. So Natalie, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started into the sales and business world prior to starting your company, which we're going to spend the most time talking about?
Sure. So I went to the University of Pittsburgh and I went to school for marketing. And then when I got out of school, I immediately was in different sales roles, first in advertising sales for a short time. And then most of my sales career was in medical device sales. But I do really think that role prepared me tremendously for what I was later going to do for Covermade because I did so much cold calling and I had to get used to what it feels like to hear no and
Sure.
to, just keep trying again. Especially one of the sales positions I was in was 10 to 12 cold calls a day.
Mm-hmm. So let me get this straight. You were in sales, you had to make cold calls, and you got told no. You're like the only salesperson that's ever been told no on a cold call. Get out of here.
Well, that's
Um,
why you get so good at it and you don't care anymore, right?
that's right. That's exactly right. No, well, it's good to hear that because, and you're spot on. That had to have led to such success with Covermade. Let's dive into that. So you went to school in Pittsburgh. You graduated. You're doing medical device sales. You're making a good living. You're having some fun. As fun as medical device sales can be. No offense to anybody
Right.
listening that sells medical device. Don't forget the host sells insurance. So not that exciting either. But with all seriousness, Natalie, where did this idea come from? Like what, you're making the bed one day and you're like, there's got to be a better way. And maybe, is that the answer? Like, tell us.
Pretty much. So it actually had a lot to do with the job that I was in because I was in a road warrior sales position that covered 2 states. Ohio and part of West Virginia. And I was on the road probably a total of 6 hours a day, leaving before the sun was up. But I would wake up in the morning and I was in such a rush to leave for the day that even though I'm a really pretty neat and clean person, some days I just would just not make the bed. And that's how it all started. I hated coming home at night and walking into my bedroom and seeing a big mess, like a heaping mess of covers on my bed. And I just started thinking there has got to be a product out there that I can just find and go buy that makes it easier to make the bed. And I looked everywhere. I started looking in stores, I started looking online, and there was nothing. The category did not even exist. And so that's really where Covermade was born. And I started coming up with my own idea for how an easy bed making product would work, and just went from there.
So what you just described is very akin to a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and inventors, where they're looking for a solution to their personal problem, and they can't find one. But the difference between you and other inventors that make a product is that you actually did something about it. How many times do we hear people say, oh, I thought of Uber years ago. I just, I didn't share it with anybody, right? That stuff happens all the time. So the difference is you had that light bulb moment and you took executable action on it, which is really super cool. So let's dive into that. So you had this idea. You said there's got to be a better way. You couldn't find one. And now here you are the next day and you're like, I think I have an idea I want to pursue. Talk about that path and what you did.
Sure. So I started prototyping myself, and I just kept envisioning in my mind, hey, this is going to be a comforter that has elastic attached to it that is hidden, but keeps everything in place. And a big thing too, that's part of the design, is I did not want it to feel confining in any way. So it had to keep the covers in place, make it easier to make the bed, keep my bedroom looking great, also prevent cover stealing is another thing it does, but it had to do that without ever feeling confining. So I started going to Joann Fabrics and getting all different types of elastic and thread and pins and all, just experimenting, literally sitting on my bedroom floor with a comforter and a bunch of supplies. And I couldn't find elastic that was wide enough to do what I wanted it to do. So it turns out when I was in pharmacies for my sales calls, I saw Ace elastic bandages, and that was the only thing I could envision that had the exact stretch, width, and quality that I was looking for. So it started with that. I brought home a bunch of different brands and started becoming kind of obsessed with testing how they stretched, did they keep their stretch, and then coming up with kind of a crude prototype.
So are you like a designer by default? Were you always into tinkering around with making stuff and sewing stuff? I mean,
No.
you sound like, it sounds like Pinterest. Like I'm just envisioning you go, like, I don't know. That's what's going through my mind.
No, not at all. I really had never worked a sewing machine in my life. I think I knew how to like thread a needle, but I was definitely not that type of like artsy craftsy, like building things type of person. I just really had this vision in my head of like, this can work. I'm going to find a way to kind of connect the dots and put this product together and test it.
Wow. That is pretty cool because I would have assumed that you would have said, yeah, I was artsy and crafty growing up as a kid and I always like to make stuff, but that wasn't the case at all. That's awesome. So talk about, by the way, I caught what you said, that it had to have give, it had to have room, and the cover stealing thing. It's such a big deal. So I love how you put all that thought behind the design. So talk about the journey from prototype to actual getting it into production. Like when you finally said, you know what, I think I got it. Now we need to produce it. How did that come about?
So I had a very, very crude prototype that was literally my Ace elastic bandages, and it was frayed and it was pinned together, but it worked. And I took sewing lessons and I made more prototypes that were good enough for me to just test the idea, but they weren't really pitchable and presentable because I just wasn't that good at sewing. So I learned how to sew, but then I ended up finding a seamstress that could make me samples that were more presentable and had like perfect lines, perfect seams, just Perfect. So once I had that, then I started looking for manufacturers through the NAICS database at the library.
Pause for a second. What is what did you just say? What is that database?
So it's like an industry database where basically you can go in and you can search for whatever industry you're looking for and find companies that manufacture products or that are in that space. So
that's awesome. What's it called again? The what is it?
NAICS.
NAICS. Okay, sorry. People might want to look that up. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I went to the library. I talked to a resource librarian, had them start to help me. We're literally just looking for information. And I got a bunch of books out on product development and patents. And from those books, I learned how to send samples to these manufacturers. So I literally had the seamstress make about 10 samples. And I mailed them out to some manufacturers that I had kind of pre-qualified, and I sent it with a pitch letter from me. And then, so I would look online and find out who would be a good person to send the sample to, and then I would follow up with a phone call. So that's initially, long story short, how I found my first manufacturer and got my first run of production.
Now, was that initially, and I don't know about today as an actual product in for sale, but with that story you just said, was that in the States or was that overseas?
It was in the States. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. And when it comes to the that journey, so you put together the mailing, you mail it out to what, as you said, roughly 10 different places. You put your pitch letter, your cover letter for Covermade, and you put it in there, and you follow up with a phone call. How was it getting folks to get on the phone and or return your call or your email? Like, talk about that.
So a lot of misfits where you call and you find they don't, because kind of taking a step back, even since then, all production pretty much has moved from the United States. And even the product that was produced here was only assembled here. But everything has really moved overseas. But yeah, so the cold calls, I would call the manufacturer and find out that they didn't really quite make exactly what I needed them to make or have the right equipment, even though they were listed in the textile space. Maybe they did draperies or they did something else that they weren't able to make what I was looking for, or they just didn't get what I was talking about and thought I was just some, crazy girl off the street because I didn't have a company. I didn't have a patent then. It was just me with an idea trying to get people to listen. And until eventually there was a bedding manufacturer that ended up licensing the product from me initially. They liked the idea and ended up taking it on. That's really how I got my start. But my first phone call with them did not go well. First person I talked to, I just remember him saying to me, he didn't understand the product. Obviously, you got to see it too. But he was just like, how are you going to market this? Like, what do you know about our business? And the truth was, I had a lot to learn. But that's, how I think how you learn is by putting yourself in that position of, hey, I need help, and ask the right people, find the right people, and be willing to, just put yourself out there. That's
right. No, I love that. That's really advice for anything in general, not just your situation. Okay, so you got. Let's move on to the next phase of the journey. So you got somebody convinced, you got it licensed, right? And you started making the product. Talk about how you got it into ultimately. You got it featured in Good Housekeeping. You got it featured in Reader's Digest. It's available currently at Bed Bath & Beyond, Brookstone, Wayfair, some of my wife and I's favorite stores. Like, again, you don't just pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a great product, put it on the shelf. It doesn't work that way. Talk about that process.
Sure. So it's funny. I initially contacted Bed Bath & Beyond when I just had a great working prototype, and they shut me down. I mean, the buyer was very nice. I cold called him, somehow got him on the phone, finally got through to him. And he was very nice and very encouraging. He said, I hope you call me back one day. But he said, you're not ready for us. And that was a great lesson, because I took the next few years to do what I needed to do to get to the next step, to get a sales history, to get some traction, to get some other partners. And then later on, when I went back, the answer was yes.
That's awesome. So you cold called to get the product made. You cold called to get to Bed Bath and Beyond and Brookstone and Wayfair, et cetera. I'm sensing a theme here. So it all it all goes back to your days as cold calling in the medical device equipment sales.
I really think so. I
That's
do.
awesome.
I do, because I learned from that how to find the right person using the internet, or,
Sure.
other, just looking people up and trying to find the right prospects, is fundamental of sales, right?
Sure.
So I would find out who the buyer was for Brookstone, Wayfair. I remember with Brookstone, I couldn't get through. I had a name, but they wouldn't let me talk to them. So I just kept sending an email pitch to all the different combinations of the first and last name and the email
I
at
love that.
brookstone.com.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I kept getting return. And then finally my email went through. And they didn't respond right away, but within a few weeks, I had an email back from the assistant buyer. And then I flew to their headquarters to
Wow.
pitch the product. Yeah.
That's so cool. Did you hear that, everybody? And I've done that before too, but not everybody does that, where, you just figure out the combo to get to the email address. So the first letter, last name, first name, last letter, like you just play around, or dot. There's just so many ways to play. It's not always going to work, but talk about magic. That was awesome. Really creative. So when it comes to getting into production for these stores, I mean, you can't just have 10 at your house in your basement or in your garage waiting. I mean,
you start there, but
did you start there? I mean, is that how it got moved, where you were like, stuffing boxes to send to customers and putting their label on the box? I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, so the first run of production, we were very conservative. I only produced the product in white because it is very expensive to do colors, because you have minimum yardage or meter requirements for the fabric buying.
Sure.
So I won't get too much into that, but from a risk perspective, it made sense to just produce the product in white and see how it did. So that's what I did initially.
That's awesome.
So I started off with a very small amount and then just kept, filling bigger runs of production.
That's
until
so cool.
I could do colors.
Yeah. So how many colors do you have available now online at these stores, or how many SKUs, or what?
So we have 8 colors. I have 2 new colors coming next month.
Okay.
So there'll be 10.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And next month, meaning December?
December. Yes.
Awesome. Perfect.
Definitely December,
Perfect.
2 new colors.
And you have some exciting news too that I wanted to talk about. So I hear this is going to be available through QVC. It'll be highlighted on QVC at some point.
Yes, it is. The product for QVC just arrived to their warehouse actually this week. Now, There is some time and planning that goes into the actual air date. So we haven't set an air date yet, but I just went through their guest excellence course where you become a certified co-host for QVC. So I'm really excited to bring Covermade on a platform of that size, because we're going to be able to reach so many people.
Holy cow, that's incredible. So it's going to be you on TV. Look at you, TV star, from medical device sales cold calling to TV star. I love it. I love it. Congratulations on that to come.
Thank you.
And you also have a new product coming out to complement Covermade Easy Bed Making Comforters. Talk about that.
So it was always my goal to eventually, as we grow, bring in some complementary home textile products. And the natural next step for me was to do pillows. So I spent probably 3 months or so just getting different samples of pillows and testing them, doing a lot of sleeping, a lot of hard work, sleep testing, all these different pillows. And there's a lot that goes into how a pillow is made. I've definitely learned that, but I did select two different types of fill. So those will be launching here shortly within the coming months.
That's so cool. That's awesome. And I mean, that's what you have to do. You can't just have one product. You have to continue to innovate and think about new ideas. So I'm excited to see what the future of the pillow and then beyond brings to Covermade as a company. So let me ask you a question as we start to close out. And I'm just thinking out loud here. I mean, this whole pandemic thing with COVID and so forth, has that, or how has that affected you? And has it affected you as a company in a relatively flat way, a negative way, or a positive way? I mean, people are spending more time at home. They're probably taking more naps. They're probably sleeping more. I don't know. I would assume as a layman, I would think that it might have actually helped, but you tell me. I don't know.
It really did. I think there's some correlation between, COVID and what they call like nesting, like almost like when a woman's pregnant and she's in her house and getting everything ready, and it's the same kind of concept.
That didn't happen in my house. Oh.
So I did find that with everyone at home, especially when we were in full-blown quarantine, I mean, and it still has continued, but I think a lot of people are focusing on what they can do around the house because they're spending so much more time there. So in that regard, it definitely, brought us some business in that respect. But, then there's changes too, because, like my presentation with QVC will be via Skype.
Oh, wow.
Versus, they're not doing the in studio. So, there's all different ways that we adapt to what's been going on, but
Sure. Absolutely. Well, listen, I've had such a great time chatting with you. I told you off air, and I'll say it on air too, because I imagine there's people like me as well. I love learning about products and their development and their journey and their story. And I love learning how they're made. Like, I know that we didn't get into it today. We don't have enough time, but, I love watching shows and videos about the assembly line and watching workers put something together and sew things together, the how it's made type shows. So this was really, really super cool for me. So I appreciate you indulging and coming on as the show. And for those of you watching or listening anywhere podcasts are consumed, obviously we appreciate you tuning in. But Natalie, tell everybody where they can check out your product, your website, where they can buy it. Remind them. We want them to go get their Christmas gifts going.
Sure. So covermadebedding.com. We're also available through bedbathandbeyond.com, brookstone.com, wayfair.com. And you can follow us on Facebook, Covermade Bedding. We're on Instagram. I'm on there, Natalie Monaco. Instagram, Natalie.Monaco. I'm on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn. So yes, feel free to connect.
There you go. Well, that's how we met, was LinkedIn, and I appreciate it. I don't think I have any other questions, and we're out of time. So for everybody behind the scenes, I have an army of people, small army, who helped me put this together from the editing team. And on behalf of them and myself, I appreciate you coming on, and thank everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, #RockstarsRocking. If you're not already subscribed or listening every week, we have a new rockstar guest, just like Natalie, sharing their story about how they're crushing their business and life goals. Please go ahead and subscribe and tune in every week. And until next time, this has been another Rockstar episode of Rockstars Rocking podcast. And thanks again for coming on, and thanks again for listening.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.